It's another mix breakdown. Today we're going to be discussing my song, Nothing Old Will Disappear. Another song that sort of, came out of the ether here, and I translated it into a song for everybody to listen to. At the top of this video, though, I also wanted to thank the patrons on Patreon who sponsor these videos. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but there should not be commercials playing before these videos like on my other videos, but that is because the patrons sponsor this specific mix breakdowns, all of the mix breakdowns, in fact. So thank you guys who do. So huge thanks to those of you who are on my Patreon page. If you like these mix brown, so huge thanks to those of you who are on the Patreon page, showing your patronage and your support for the channel. If you're someone who watches these videos and gets something out of them, please do consider checking out the Patreon page. There's all sorts of fun rewards over there for signing up. And then you will keep these mix breakdowns happening. Anyway, well, let's get to the mix breakdown. Round and round I go. Where I stop, I know. The first thing that I need to discuss in this video is the fact that in the actual video of this song, you see me playing my real upright piano, which is way, way, way down at the other end of my apartment now. And I wasn't actually recording that piano. I did it for the video because it looks better than me just playing my little M Audio keyboard. Which brings me to what piano sound I was using. My regular viewers out there, I'm sure you already know. It's right here. This is the Grand Rhapsody plugin from Waves. Here it is right here. And I'm using the honky tone key. So this is basically like a honky tonk piano kind of a thing, which essentially means that it is like an old saloon piano, right? Which also means that there's a ton of chorus on it because they didn't emulate anything that was really out of tune. But if you throw a chorus on there, it gives you that semi, out of tune effect. It's a great sound, great sound. Let me just get to it for you. If you did hear a few clicks and pops there, that's mostly because my computer is being taxed right now. It's doing a screen recording and all this stuff. But anyway, it doesn't normally do that. I did a few things to change the sound a little bit from the stock sound that Waves gives you, which is basically I turned the knob on the mix down to 34% here. And just so you know, this is the diffused chorus effect in this plugin. The other thing that I did was I added the U87 emulator on this piano because the original plugin sound is a little bit on the thin side. So I wanted it to be a little bit beefier. But when you use chorus on any of the pianos, even if you're using the stock piano sound in GarageBand, adding chorus to it is not only sort of like a great way to help it sort of fill out the stereo space a little bit, but it gives it a very 80s vibe. That's sort of how I thought about it when I started playing with this particular sound. It's very 80s, kind of like maybe a little bit early 90s, like Elton John kind of a thing. It's a super popular, famous sound, a little bit from the past, but as things in life are cyclical, such as music, I have started to hear this particular piano sound come back a little bit. And, if you like Dawes, they have occasionally used this piano sound and stuff like that. Great sound. Again, I'll just play it. You know what I mean? It's just that sound. I'm sure you've heard this somewhere before. In the whole mix, listen to it and really do think about, how much space it's taking up in the left and right channels. And then also the sort of the underlying quality that it just sort of adds to the song in general. Here's the whole mix. But then the green line makes it all go away. Between the lines of a brand new day. Do you hear that? The sort of like swirlingness of that chorus, it really takes up a really interesting space in the mix. So if you're using the GarageBand piano sound, feel free, try it. Drop a chorus on there and play with the speed and the intensity and all that kind of stuff. It might just be the thing your piano track needs, okay? So let's move on to the lead vocals, because this is one of the few songs where I did really compress the shit out of this vocal on the way in. As always, I'm using my Jomeek 3Q preamp channel strip. It's a great little thing. It's got it's got a preamp in it, obviously, has an EQ, and it has a compressor. Nice little optical compressor that if you do know how to adjust it properly, you don't hear it too much. It's an optical compressor, which inherently has a little bit, sometimes it could just be a little overbearing. I have it dialed in a pretty nice fashion here. If you have the ability to compress before the recording hits GarageBand, I highly recommend it on things like vocals like this, where, this was at the top of my vocal range. So there's a ton of volume coming out of my head when I sing this kind of thing. But in general, it will just help smooth out the recording in general. And you won't have to deal with a lot of peaks and valleys. Now, that being said, I did end up compressing it again, just to help it be a little bit more in the mix. Let's look at the plugins here. Right, so I'm using this time I'm using the FG116 vintage. It's the blue edition. Maybe you know what this is supposed to be emulating, but I have it dialed in kind of medium. Let's look at the VU meter here. As my buzz slowly starts to wear off, I recognize all the battles I've lost. So what you should be noticing is, the attack, that's really what it's grabbing. And, my compressor before I recorded it was doing a good job. But as I was mixing it, I could hear those attacks on the first words of each line, that they were just getting a little bit overbearing. It's important to get those kinds of things right, because when you get to the mastering stage, you will find that little tiny things like that will sort of send your RMS into oblivion. It'll just keep pushing you over that limit. You have to compress things right before you get to the mastering stage, or else the mastering stage is just a lot more difficult than it needs to be, and you will be mastering around those kinds of peaks. So again, I'm going to push play again, but what you should see is that it's grabbing those and then just sort of falling off, right? The ratio is 1:4. The attack is at 3.3 milliseconds and the release is at 4. So the release is pretty medium and the attack is a little bit on the fast side, right? But watch this VU meter again. Round and round I go, where I stop I know, life will lead me back to here, right? So you can see it's not really holding. It's not like hitting and the needle's just staying there, right? It's dropping off a little bit. So that is basically telling you I'm grabbing that moment, I'm falling off. There's another moment, I'm grabbing it. That's what this compression style will do for a vocal track, especially if the vocal had already been compressed on the way in. I do recommend that you have a compressor externally, or you could do what I do, which is I have the Sapphire Pro 24 DSP, which allows you to compress with a plugin that is before GarageBand. So I have two ways to compress on the way in. Using the Jomeek is just a lot more simple for me because it's just sort of like push the button, set the knobs, right? I don't have to open a whole other application or anything. On the EQ, and again, this was using the SM7B, which I'm starting to use again. I tried all these different microphones, and I like to sort of rotate the microphones through Music Monday. But as I'm sort of continuing on this, make sure my vocals are up in front thing, I wanted to get back to the SM7 and really figure out how do I get some better clarity out of this microphone, because it is a little bit dark. It's a broadcast microphone by, design. But anyway, so here's what this EQ looks like. This is at 10 kilohertz, and it is being bumped up at 1.74 dB. We can call that 2 dB. This is the breathiness. This is the S's. This is the T's, right? This range, this 10 kilohertz range. Now let's go down to the high mid frequencies. This is 6, we'll just call that 6 kilohertz. And again, the volume is at, we'll just say 3 decibels, okay? So this range is the upper part of the throat sound, right? It's not so much of the T's as it is, the other one is. This is the upper part of that sort of throaty sound that some particular voices have. I don't know if your voice has it or not, but that's sort of the general range for that. Now, as we come down here, of course, this is going to be 200 hertz, and I'm just yanking it out. this microphone, this room, my voice, and in general, 200 hertz is going to sort of, you know, it's the tubbiness, it's the thuddiness. You don't always want it on everything, and I do tend to sort of like yank it out of almost everything. Not a lot, and sometimes like on acoustic guitars, I will actually accentuate it in certain cases if I wanted to have some of that thud behind the low end. Just something you should be aware of. As per usual, I'm at 130 hertz on the low end, and that is more of like the chest and the low end range of a vocal sound, okay? So then I have the compressor in the middle, and on the other side, I've started doing the EQ on the other side of this compressor, which is just, it's not the way that the Slate Digital stuff drops it in, but because of the fact that I was so impressed with what happened when I was doing those GarageBand presets, just using those presets, I kept seeing this method used a lot. So I was like, I'm doing that in the Slate stuff. And it came up with a really nice tone. The compressor, you know, it's going to grab those attacks, right? So I wanted to bring them back out a little bit with an EQ. This is at, you know, 2 dB, we'll call that. And this is another, this is 3.5, and this is at 2 kilohertz, right? So again, these are sort of the high-end details of a vocal track. Just something I wanted to sort of point out, like what frequencies are exactly like dealing with what sounds you are listening to out of a voice, right? So, and this is of course going to be subjective, or not subjective, but it's going to really depend on the voice, the microphone, the room, all these different things. But that's how you should be thinking about the EQ when you apply it. Like, what part of the voice am I actually affecting? Understanding that there is like the sibilant stuff, there's the throaty stuff, there's the chest stuff. All of that you want to be able to identify with your ears and be able to EQ properly, and then also do comprehend what your compressor is doing to that sound as you apply the compression. You can EQ after the compressor to sort of bring back stuff that the compressor might have gotten rid of, okay? So that's the lead vocals on this one. And that's the other thing about this song. Like, a lot of times in my Music Monday songs, I do a lot of background vocals. I really wanted this to be sort of, you know, my voice. The only place where I double it is here, and it's in the choruses, and I'm using the mega wide chorus, which I really like to use for second vocals. Like if you're going to have a doubled vocal, you can add the mega wide vocal chorus, mega wide chorus, just to, again, shoot it out a little bit in the left and right channels, just to give a little bit of a stereo spread. I know it's just a chorus, it's not really spreading it out to the sides, but it gives you that effect, right? So it fills up a little bit more of the space in the mix. Now, all right, I think that's enough for the vocals. Oh, I will say this, on this double vocal, it's pretty low in the mix, and I did that on purpose. I just wanted it to be like a little bit of a support role. I didn't really want you to hear the doubling effect, because there's an echo on this, and there's an echo on the lead vocal as well. So that's doing plenty of the doubling effect. And we'll just listen to this. Go ahead. Here's the chorus.
Round and round I go, where I stop I know, life will lead me back to here. And deep.
Okay. And one thing we could talk about is the automation on the echo here. You know, when I was mixing this song, I got to that section where you see it being cut out right here. And it was like, I just didn't want to hear that delay happening all the time. And that is just, let me solo this out. Let me solo the right channel out for you. Here we go.
Round and round I go, where I stop I know, life will lead me back to here. And even though I try, I'm a simple guy.
You understand what I'm saying there? So, and again, you know, in other videos I've talked about this. This delay is dialed in kind of low in the mix. I mean, even though if you like look down here, it's pretty loud, right? But that's just sort of because the level of the track and all sorts of different components of this particular track. But in the whole mix, you don't really hear that. I mean, you hear it, but it's not overbearing. And I really only like to hear the last bit of the lyrics. So I keep it sort of low in the mix because I don't want to hear all of it, right? So here's the whole thing again.
Round and round I go, where I stop I know, life will
right? So there, like all you hear is the no, go. You don't hear all of them, but that's because it's well balanced in the mix, right?
Round and round I go. Where I stop, I know. Life will lead me back to here.
Right? Super standard delay trick for vocals, but that echo, and then also being able to sort of decide, I want it everywhere or I want it in some places. That's where the automation comes in, and that's all up to you. I will say this, when you are dropping automation points, and I probably could have brought this one back even to here, so I didn't even have to hear this first one. But, you know, if you're going to try to, like, if you want to cut off this last word, you have to stop the effect well before you get to that event on the track, right? Just make sure you're not dropping, like, the edit point right on top of it, right? So if, like, it was here, you would still hear this last word, even though the delay has been turned off right here, it would still be delaying. It's what this is like really the input gain. Really, you could think of it like that. So, okay, that's the backup vocals. Okay, let's keep going down, because one of the things that I did in here was the acoustic guitars, right? And they're only in the choruses. And this is, you know, production stuff. I know somebody was like, I hope it's going to be a production breakdown. So let's talk about that here. In the choruses, I wanted there to be a little bit of a lift. And I tried some electric guitars. It was just a little overbearing. I wanted it to be sort of smooth sailing sound. So I went for the acoustic guitar. It's not compressed on the way in or anything. But what I am doing is using the acoustic guitar preset from the Slate Digital package. Okay. This is what they sound like. Right? Acoustic guitars, when you're mixing them in a song like this, make sure you got plenty of high end coming out of that guitar. It is critical. Otherwise, you're really not going to hear it. Like, you're not going to try to mix like a nice warm sounding acoustic guitar in a song such as this, like in a basic like pop rock-ish song, right? You're not going to do that. You're really going to make an effort to make sure you can hear that pick on the string sound. It's like a shaker or a tambourine in the mix, but you've got to hear it. It adds a rhythmic element because this is a rhythm guitar, right? So you want to hear the rhythmic element of it, which of course is going to be the strumming on the strings. I don't want to talk too much about the acoustic guitar treatment because they're so dependent on the guitars you're using, how fresh your strings are, the microphone you're using. I am using my Lewitt Audio LCT 140 in this particular song. But, you know, for example, 5 dB at 7.5 kilohertz, that's a lot. That's a big boost in the high end. I also have the Revival plugin, which is nice. It's only going up to 4 dB, just a little bit to just give it a little bit of shine on top of the overall. And again, it's after the compressor, okay? And they're in stereo. So again, when I'm talking about that lift, you can see up and down this track, like I'm not playing in the verses here. I'm not playing in the last verse here. It's not in the first verse. That acoustic guitar was sort of brought in and taken out strategically throughout the song. This is a really, really great way to add dynamics, a great way to sort of change the overall mood of the song. And just by dropping out and stopping playing in general, boom, automatically you get a new dynamic, and the dynamic drops down. In this case, it's for the verses, right? And then sometimes I think in this verse right here, I am playing through. So it's going to be up to you. This is subjective matter. Another one. Just keep that kind of stuff in mind. Do I need to be playing through the whole song? I mean, I hear it all the time when I get songs from you guys to mix. I just see tracks that are just going from the beginning to the end. All of the tracks, like the instrument is just going 100% of the time. It's not always necessary. Sometimes it's really great to omit some of that stuff to help, you know, sort of clean up the verses so that when you do get to a chorus, you have stuff to draw on and from, right? You have things to use to push up in those choruses. And it's like, oh, there's that sound either again or for the first time. Just keep in mind, you don't have to play all the way through. And even if you do, you can automate stuff in and out. That's a production tip for you there. Now, the solo, which I really like the tone on this guy. Listen to this. It's just super fun. It doesn't have a ton of like, I don't know, it's not like so detailed that you could hear every single note or anything, but it's got that super swirly phaser going on. This is a stock GarageBand sound, nothing special on it at all. This is using the Practice Space plugin, or preset rather, out of the Crunch Guitar window. So if you're looking for a sound like this is one of my favorite ones lately. I've been playing with this one a lot. Just for the fun of it. It's just, you know, I'm always trying new sounds for Music Monday, all that kind of stuff. The rate is turned up pretty high, as you can see down here, you know, maybe a little bit, we'll call that 1 o'clock. I got some echo on it, and I have that room reverb absolutely maxed out. I really wanted to hear that. Because of the sort of the overall tone of this song was semi supposed to be, I think, you know, somebody commented a couple times, like, you should write sort of like a lo-fi Dr. Dog sounding song. That's what this basically was an attempt at. It didn't come out exactly as lo-fi as I had wanted, but that's because, like, as I kept going, I was like, I don't want it to sound like that. But I did do something I haven't done before on a Music Monday, which is I threw an echo on the drum kit. So we should talk about that a little bit. The echo is straight out of GarageBand. It's a 1/32 dotted notes, and they sound like this. Let's just get to the top here. And yes, if you've ever wondered, can I just drop a whole delay on the entire drum track? Yeah, you can totally do that. What ends up happening is, like, you really pretty much only hear it on the snares and toms and stuff. A little bit on the kick, of course, if it's soloed out like this. But in the whole mix, you don't really hear, you don't hear it on the kick. Check it out. Right? You hear it on that snare, you hear it on the hi-hat, and occasionally in a couple of those crashes, you might be able to detect it. But in general, it's that snare and that hi-hat sound that will really benefit from dropping an echo on the entire drum track. Since we can't isolate these drums and then apply delay or whatever you want to them as individuals, this is a great way. Just drop it on the whole thing and go with it. Dial it back, though. You know, I mean, the dry's at 96%, the wet's at 25 here. And that is basically just because I didn't want to hear it on, like, I didn't want it to be overbearing. That sound could be totally, like, too much, right? You got to be careful with this kind of stuff. So that is that. The electric guitar sound in general is this one, the Britain Clean. Right now, I did a couple of things here. I left the compressor on, I left this EQ on, and I dropped this guy in here, right? And this is just the preamp, the FG73 preamp. This is a great little preamp. You know, they've come up with all these new ones, but I like these older ones. They're really basic, really simple sounding, but they sound just like what they need to sound like. And in this particular case, this is just a great way to lift the sort of low mid range. This particular one, it's not super warm or anything. It just adds a really nice quality for clarity. If you have the Slate plugin stuff, don't forget this FG73 totally rocks. Love this thing. So it is just a stock preset, right? It's the Britain Clean thing out of GarageBand, but I did add that preamp at the end just to help it have a little bit more clarity. That's that. Now I think the last thing to talk about is the bass and pick brightener as per usual, people. Nothing going on here. Stock as can be. Let's see, did I do anything? Compressor, I switched it over to bass light, and I probably closed down this threshold a tiny bit to negative 21 dB. I played it in a certain way where it didn't need a ton of compression. But you know, I love this pick brightener sound. It is so good. If you're playing with a pick, you know, you might have to add a little bit of low end, which I'm sure I did. Yeah, around 100 hertz. I definitely always do this if I'm using the pick brightener. Sometimes it's not thumpy enough for me and my little Epiphone bass, so just push it up here, push it up at 40, and everything else around here is probably about stock. Nothing too exciting, didn't move the microphone, nothing. You know, I'm really getting more and more into using the plugin presets out of GarageBand because, I mean, as you know, if you watch my videos, I started with the bass, then I'm like doing it a lot more on acoustic guitars and electric guitars and stuff. Those sounds are so good, you guys. Trust those sounds. Now, the very last thing I want to talk about about the overall production of this song. This was something different for me, and when I started writing this song, I had the basic chords down, and I was trying to figure out a way to make it a little more interesting. So what I want to recommend and what I'm going to tell you is basically what I did was like really like listen to the drum part, and I started just playing to that drum part much more like strictly than I was previously. So boom boom cha boom boom cha bum 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 bum, right? Those 1 2 3 4, those last 4 quarter notes, that is straight out of the drum part, and it was just what it needed. So I want you to remember, if you're trying to come up with a song and you're using the auto drummer here, whatever drum track you're playing to, just remember that like that might just be something you need to like pay attention to a little bit more, and that might donate a new idea to the rhythm part of the rhythm guitar, right? It was a really fun thing to sort of follow that, and when I started doing it, I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what it needed. So that's the last thing I want to talk about on the production side and the mixing side of this song. Mastering, I haven't talked about a lot, and I should probably talk about mastering a little bit. I have my own preset. I'm using the what is this one? The FBC FG Red. I'm using the virtual mixer, and I have a bunch of EQ going on here. And of course I'm using the FGX Slate digital thing at the very end. You know, if you're curious about how I master my Music Monday songs, let me know in the comment section below, and I will make a video specifically about that. If you're curious about how I go about mastering these songs, my methods and what I do. The True Iron was actually off in this particular song. And for no reason, I just didn't want it to have that sound. I use it pretty much on everything else. So in this particular case, I was like, nah, I'm not using it today. Let's turn it off and have. So this song has its own, slightly different sound. But this is a wonderful plugin, this thing. I know a bunch of you have bought it. I love this thing. It's awesome. Anyway, outro time. You guys, thank you so much for watching. Patrons, thank you so much for sponsoring these videos. Again, if you watch these, learn from them and like them and want them to continue, check out the Patreon page, because that is what is making these particular videos happen. And so you guys should all be thanking the patrons down in the comment section, because they really are the people who make this video happen. So I think that's about it. I gotta finish editing this video, and then I gotta go teach some guitar to some awesome kids, and get to ride my brand new motorcycle today, so that's gonna be fun. But anyway, you guys, have an awesome, awesome day. Thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting. Find me on Instagram. And that's it, all right? Peace and love.
Round and round I go. Where I stop, I know.